Hello and welcome to this video where today I want to talk about the scanning schedules, specifically looking at the on-prem installation. Let's jump right into Lansweeper and see what we can see here. So I have logged into my Lansweeper installation. I've come up to scanning and grabbed my scanning targets. And as you can see here, I have two different scan targets that are available. If I can get this to stay out there, two different targets that are available. And when you get into that, we have two different tabs here because in my lab here, I have two different scan servers that are available. But what I want to do is demonstrate, because of my lab, I don't have a lot of information on this one. Let's look here at this lab and this particular installation. I want to talk about scanning schedules because scanning schedules can really impact the performance of your server. As you can see in my environment here, I've got quite a few different scan targets. The reality is I don't have a whole lot of assets. When I look at my asset list is not too big or too extensive. I've got about 1,200 different assets that are in here right now, and that's not a really big number here for Lansweeper to be scanning off of with one scan server. But this all depends on the impact, especially here in the on-prem environment. So when I look at my scan targets, a couple things I want you to consider when you're looking at this is I'm looking at domain scans. And so in my lab, I've got several domains I'm looking at. I also have some user paths within the domain. You can have another entry here of just specifically computer paths within AD. So to put the ADSI path in here for just the computers. And I have IP ranges, SECM, and you can have many, many more. So depending on exactly what you're targeting, things can have an impact on your scan servers. Another area that could impact your performance of your scanning can be inside of, so over here into scanning, you have the file and registry scanning, where registries, if you're familiar with getting in and editing and looking at registries, sometimes that can take time for those to load. Same thing for files and getting access to files. We can also be looking at performance scanning. So with the on-prem installation, we can actually track and monitor the performance of different servers. Granted, all of this takes a lot more compute, a lot more storage, and a lot more data flow through your network with these particular scanning. The other one I wanted to address is over here in configuration. I come down to general, server options. Let me get to the correct scan server again, and I'm going to scroll down the page here just a little ways. We can also do event log scanning. And again, if you do a lot of looking at event logs, you know that it can take time for those event logs to load up. This can also cause an impact on performance. So even though my asset count is only in the little over 1,000, I can still have some scanning performance issues. And that's why the number of scan servers is it depends, because it just depends on some of these configuration items. But let's look at some of the scan schedules so we have an idea of how can you improve maybe your scan times. So inside of my scan targets, I'm going to click the button here up on top that says expand all schedules, and it'll of course make this page very long. Couple things I want to point out is the difference here. I have active scanning for the domain, where active scanning is really more of an active. I wouldn't call it a live scan, but about every 10 to 15, 20 seconds, somewhere in there, it will actually check Active Directory. Is there any changes inside of Active Directory, new servers that have been added, and it will then begin to bring that into Lansweeper, compared to the other paths and the other ways to scan where these are built off of schedules. You can see in my lab here, pretty much by default, every day is set to just run at the same time. And this can become a problem because look at how many of these assets that I have in here that is scanning all of these at the same time up here. Down here, they're all happening on the same days, same times. And if you find that this is overloading your servers and you have a lot of conflicts, or maybe there's a lot of backup, then we can modify this scan schedule. But before I do that, you might be asking, well, how do I know if I have backup? How do I know if I'm having some slowdown? So over here is the scanning queue. You can also find that up here by going to scanning and come down to scanning queue here. So let's go ahead and click on that. And inside of my scanning queue, I can see that right now my scan server is sitting pretty quiet. It's not doing a whole lot. There's nothing happening here. But I've seen in some environments that you will see the queue, either the IP queue or the windows where it's actually actively scanning machines, this queue can become very large. If you're looking at several thousand here, your server's just not able to keep up. And especially if you're watching the performance and that CPU and that RAM is hit pretty hard, these scanning schedules that are conflicting could cause a big queue. So let's go over to the scanning targets again. Sorry, we're jumping around so much, but I hope you're seeing where you can get some of this information out of Lansweeper. You can come into your scanning schedules, and I would encourage you to do a couple things. As you can see, Active Directory, let's just assume a new asset has been added to the Contoso environment. It's going to detect that. It's going to go out and scan that asset right away. That's one scan. Another scan may be at an IP range. Down here, my Contoso IP range, it's going to scan. Let's look at this schedule. It's going to scan at 0923 every day. And this is also going to pick up an asset, potentially even that same asset. Down here in my SCCM environment, this schedule says it's going to be scanning every Monday at 0500 hours. So we've got three potential times here where this particular server or something that's new been added to my Contoso domain is going to be scanned. So one way we could work around this is making, for one could be to turn off these active scans where it's continuing actively scanning. Another may be to change your IP ranges to only scan one time every couple days. Maybe you've got a specific IP range of servers or printers, networking devices, things that stay on all the time. Have those scan at off hours, maybe overnight, sometime in the early morning hours. And that way it reserves the bandwidth for scanning for assets like your your computers and roaming devices that are going to be on the network while staff are working. So those are some ideas that you can kind of think about on how to scan, when to scan. I would encourage you though to look at your scan schedules and see how your scan schedules are working for one. Look at your scanning queue to see how your scanning queue activity is looking. Watch it throughout the day, a couple times a day throughout the week, just to see how that performance is going, and determine for one if maybe you need to install a second scan server, or secondly if you need to change some of those scan schedules. I hope some of this information has been helpful for you. I hope that it helps you to find out not only how to schedule things, but also how to find out what that workload is like on your scan server and those scan queues. Until the next video, happy scanning, and I'll see you on the next one.